Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host, and as always got good guests for you. Always got good guests for you guys, because my aim is, one, to bring as many Black conservatives as possible onto this podcast, to give them voice, and to, secondly, give voice to other conservative folks around the country. And the best way to do that, I felt, was to go out and look for top quality minds, authors. And that's what we have today with this brother, Steve Pomper. Am I pronouncing your last name right, brother? Pomper?
Yes, Pomper.
Okay. All right. And so he's a retired Seattle, Washington police officer and author of 5 nonfiction books, including The Obama Gang. And that's the one book we're going to focus on today, and particularly chapter 28. And the reason why I wanted to focus on that particular chapter is because, as many of us know, what recently happened with the former police officer. He was convicted, 3 manslaughter charges of the death of George Floyd, and then how, when that happened, George Floyd losing his life, it just really escalated this whole Black Lives Matter movement, and all sorts of protests and violence took place. A lot of businesses were destroyed, vandalized. A lot of people were flat out terrorized. And that big narrative was the police, the white male police officers, are hunting down Black men. Brother, correct me if I'm wrong. I think even, he didn't say this in regards to the police, but LeBron James even one time said, "Oh my God, we can't step outside without someone trying to hunt us down and shoot us." And then he recently made that tweet where he showed the police officer and he says, something like to the effect of, "You're next." And that whole narrative there is that, they're coming after us. They're trying to take us down. Brother, before we get into that chapter in your book, could you just share with me some of your thoughts about that situation with the former police officer was convicted in those 3 manslaughter charges over the death of George Floyd?
Yeah, with the National Police Association, we definitely maintain a stance that we support the legal system. And we're strongly behind that. And whether we like the decision or not, we're still going to support the decision. You noticed, even with Chauvin, after the trial, a buddy of mine told me this, that, after the trial and the decision came down, he stood up, turned around, put his hands behind his back. They said, "Can you imagine where we'd be if George Floyd had done that?" So that's one of the things we support. But that also means we support the right to appeal. And he does have that right. And I mean, this is so unique that a judge would actually come out and say announce that, a sitting U.S. representative gave, basically the defense reason for appeal. For a judge to even say that when it was so obvious that everybody knew it anyway, it just adds to what they can, do on appeal. And then that leaves, more mystery down the line as to what they're going to do whenever those decisions come down.
Right.
But, yeah.
And you're obviously making reference to Maxine Waters, a rep out of California. I was sort of astounded, and I was even disappointed in, well, you give me your thoughts on what President Biden said.
That was amazing. And it wasn't even as much of what he said, but when he said it, I mean, for that to come out, I mean, they're talking about President, Trump being, kind of a firebrand and, off the cuff comments. And he's never done anything like that. In fact, I don't think any president has ever done something like that. To come down on the side of a particular, jury verdict, that's absolutely unheard of. And obviously, being at the very top of the U.S. federal government, he's sitting at the top of law enforcement, and to do that, he just talk about corrupting the system. That just blew me away. I couldn't believe even he did that. They just keep pushing that envelope.
Yes. And brother, a few seconds ago, you had mentioned how you respect the process, regardless of where it goes. If you agree with it or disagree with it, you respect the process. So what you're telling me is that if they had reached a decision you didn't agree with, you were not planning to go out and march in the streets and obstruct traffic and burn down buildings or anything like that.
No, that is not on my agenda when something like this happens. In fact, over my career, I sat through a lot of jury verdicts that I didn't like, didn't agree with. And then what I did is I left the courtroom and went back to work, because that's what we do. You know, when you're in a system like that, it's not always going to, land your way. It just isn't. And that's the way it is, especially when you're in a jurisdiction like Seattle. Mm-hmm. But you just have to go back to work and hope that the system works better the next time.
Right. Well, it's a daggone shame Maxine Waters didn't somehow or another pick up on that civics lesson.
Yeah, well, she's definitely got an agenda. I mean, her affinity for Castro was enough for me over the years to know, where she's at politically.
Yes. Brother, let's go to your book real quick here. We don't have much time left. The Obama Gang. First of all, I'm somebody who loves plugs. They shameless plugs. I think there's nothing wrong with it. You spent a whole lot of time and effort in putting together this great book. We're going to promote it. There's others to that.
I appreciate that.
Where can we go to get this book, The Obama Gang?
Well, right now it's at Amazon, and Barnes & Noble and all the, general sellers you hear about. You can also go to my website at stevepomper.com or at the National Police Association at nationalpolice.org.
Yes. Okay, great. And I particularly wanted to talk to you a little bit about your chapter here, chapter 28, killing black men myth, the myth of killing black men, I think. What was that about? Where's that coming from?
It's an obvious myth when you look into the numbers, from the FBI, or when you look into any of the, or a lot of the, scholarly papers that have been done, even from, professors at Harvard, that are just showing that that's just not occurring. I think what they're relying on is, well, you were seeing it in North Carolina right now. Every time an incident like this happens where white officers shoot a black man, they come out with white officers shoot unarmed black man. They just say that. They put it out there, whether that happened or not. Right. Then they know that's been out there. And like they say about, the lie goes around the world before the truth gets its pants on. Well, that's what's happening. That lie is going around the world. And then by the time, and which I'm hearing is happening in North Carolina, they're starting to come out with information that he may have tried to run down some officers and may have actually hit an officer. So you start to get that other side, and you find out these hero victims that they're pulling out of the criminal, gutter or whatever. Right. This guy with his 180 pages of criminal background that goes over decades. They're not very good hero victims, but that's what they're trying to do. And that's what I was, so it gives this impression that every time something like this happens, at the first instance that they're reporting it, it's white officer shoots a black man. But that's not how it ends up. But people keep hearing that over and over, so it makes it seem like it's a lie.
Mm-hmm. So basically, what you're saying is, based on your research into very reliable sources, the stats are not supporting that narrative.
No, not at all. And you'll hear, you go to the different sources that are willing to state those sources, those stats. I mean, you won't see it at CNN or MSNBC, but you go to all the other sources, and the people are not refuting it on NBC or MSNBC and CNN. These numbers are there from, and one of the sources is the Washington Post. And to hear about that the numbers they had for, I think it was 2019, it was 9 or 10 unarmed black men or women shot by police, and of them you could see that they were not, I think there was only one that ended up not being a danger to the police, but she even still had a gun, and they considered that unarmed because she was just protecting her house. And then you have people, one guy was armed with a taser, a couple were driving cars, so that's what they're considering unarmed, but still in that was 9 for the entire year. And so where they're getting this epidemic, I mean, you're hearing people talk about genocide and slaughter. Using these terms, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I have to laugh. I have a good relationship with a rabbi who went to Israel, and he did studies in the Holocaust, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I don't think I don't think these guys understand the word genocide. I don't think these
Uh,
people understand the word Holocaust.
I agree.
They need to go to Rwanda. You want to understand the
Yeah,
genocide.
they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, but what is it? I mean, why can't LeBron, with all his money, pick up and go to these sources and say, oh, you know what? I need to shut my mouth because this narrative is false.
He has some kind of agenda. And, LeBron's an interesting case because obviously a fantastic basketball player. And me being a Celtics fan, not a big fan of the Lakers. But I can understand what, his great basketball ability and also what he's done for the community. He has been philanthropic. But the thing is I don't know what that agenda is exactly because, he has off-duty LAPD protecting his house and him right now.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes and he has to see those people as he walks by. These are people protecting him and his family. And yet he still maintains this. In that case in Cincinnati where the bar owner, is basically not playing NBA games, he came out with some snide comment about, I was going to go there tonight, but now I'm not. How beneath somebody of that stature is that? We're talking about somebody with 50 million Twitter followers. Right. To me, that just really lowers him, and it says a lot more about him than it does about the LAPD. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I have to agree with you. And you talk about you're a Celtics fan. My father, he went to college in Boston, and my Lord, man, he loved him some Celtics. And
oh yeah,
if he didn't say Bill, it was Bill Russell, right, the center.
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord! But I have to admit, it was Bill got 13 rings.
He's got 11.
11, okay.
And in fact, I've got a tattoo of his fist with all the Boston rings on my arm. So it's actually on this side here. But that was from ESPN magazine. He was the best one to represent Boston for all those rings because he's got more than those rings.
Right. And yet I can't ever imagine, black athletes back in that time just doing something like that. Hey, it's putting a police officer's face up there and say, hey, you're next. I interpret that as a threat.
No, yeah.
And
then you've got Shaquille O'Neal at the other end, who is once again, he's been a reserve deputy or officer for a long time, and he wants to run for sheriff someplace. So you've got a wide spectrum there of athletes and which end they're at.
Do you think that maybe, and I don't want to talk too much about LeBron, I really don't, but do you think that there's something in the atmosphere and the culture that sort of makes him feel comfortable to be able to do something like that, even though he later took it down, but still to do it in the first place?
Well, I wonder, they talk about certain guilt that successful people have. And I think he wants to commiserate with folks that he feels are oppressed. Mm-hmm. And, if he'd open his eyes and maybe realize they're not really oppressed, then he can eject that guilt. Think about the success this guy has had in America. Yes. Is there any other place in the world, where anybody, never mind just a black man, anybody of any race can rise to that kind of success? Yes. I can't think of a place.
Rise to that kind of success and really in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah.
And then have so much pass on to his son. I don't think his son will ever experience what you might call economic deprivation.
No.
Yeah, that must be the answer. It must be some guilt there because it didn't make any sense at all to me. Folks, we are talking to Steve Pomper here. He is the author of The Obama Gang, How Barack Obama, through his post-presidency foundation, assembled, launched, and wages the new assault on American law enforcement. And you say we can get this at most any of the normal outlets like Amazon.com and other places?
Yes.
And your website as well, stevepomper.com?
Yes, that's correct.
Get it there. Folks, I strongly suggest you do. I only touched upon one chapter here. I thought it was an important chapter to touch upon because, I'm a black guy, and I guess the narrative has been I should be scared to death of these white officers. Brother, when I've called upon them, because of shootings. It's happening. Shootings. I witnessed a drive-by shooting. Mm-hmm. In the middle of the night, someone literally less than a block away on my side of the street was murdered. And I've had some people who were just extremely loud. At no time did these white officers even give me any indication that they were going to harm me. and if anything, they would come and they'd say, if you don't want to talk to us, that's fine, because these people might try to retaliate against you. They're concerned about my safety.
Right.
So I'm not sure where this narrative is coming from, but I know from my personal experience, it's just not the reality.
Right. Officers respond to behavior.
Yeah, it's just not the reality. Brothers, speaking to my listeners, this is Steve Pomper, author of the book. He's really the author of 5 nonfiction books, including The Obama Gang. Please get this book, and I really want to urge some of you to get this book and to share it with other people. We have to step up and do a better job in supporting law enforcement folk in this country. We have to do it. And for some of you who may sort of doubt that, here's what I like to say to you. I've done a lot of studies on Pan-Africanism, and when law enforcement breaks down, you have horrible, horrible situation for average people. You look at situations like in Liberia, when law enforcement broke down and that civil war broke out, it was absolutely horrible. These guys like Steve Pomper, man, they are in the front line against chaos, period. Brother, thank you so much for being on. Hopefully we can have you come back again sometime.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'll come back anytime.
All right, brother. Thank you.